The rain drizzled gently against the windows of Riverside Beastro, a cozy little restaurant tucked away in the heart of a small Oregon town. The smell of freshly baked bread and roasted garlic filled the air, mingling with the soft hum of conversation and clinking silverware. It was a Friday evening, and the place was buzzing. Local families, travelers, and a couple of business people filled the warm, candle-lit dining area at 8:15 p.m. The heavy wooden door creaked open, and a man walked in, his dark hair slightly damp from the rain, dressed in a plain black sweater and faded jeans. He carried himself with an air of quiet confidence, but something about him seemed familiar. "Welcome to Riverside Beastro. How can I help you?" The hostess chirped, her smile polite but distracted. She barely glanced up as she flipped through the reservations list. "Table for one, please," the man said, his voice low and calm. The hostess paused for a moment, sensing something in his tone. She glanced up, did a quick one-over, and assumed he was just another traveler passing through. "Well, we're fully booked tonight," she said, her voice carrying the faintest edge of condescension. "But let me see what I can do." She gestured for him to wait near the small coat rack by the entrance across the room. Ethan Carter, a waiter in his late 20s, was clearing a table with practiced precision. His brown apron was slightly wrinkled, and his hair looked like it hadn't seen a brush all day. Ethan had been working at Riverside for 5 years, not because he loved it, but because he needed the paycheck. "Another tourist," Ethan muttered under his breath when he spotted the man by the door. "Bet he'll order water and a salad and tip like it's 1995. His co-worker CLA nudged him with her elbow as she passed by. "Come on, Ethan, lighten up. It's not like he's hurting anyone." Ethan scoffed. "Yeah, but I'll bet $5. He asks for ketchup with whatever he orders. These guys always do." Just then the hostess called out to Ethan, "Hey, can you take the guy at the door to table 7? It's all we have left." Ethan sighed, grabbed a menu, and plastered on a smile so fake it could have been printed on cardboard. "Right this way, sir," Ethan said, his tone clipped and formal. The man followed quietly, his eyes scanning the room. He seemed completely unbothered by Ethan's lack of warmth. Ethan pulled out a chair at table 7, which was wedged near the kitchen door. "This is what we've got tonight. Hope it's good enough," Ethan said with a smirk. The man sat down and gave a small, polite smile. "This will do just fine, thank you." Ethan dropped the menu in front of him and said, "I'll give you a minute to look this over. Let me know when you're ready then." He walked off without another word behind the counter. CLA leaned over and whispered, "You could at least try to." Beneath Ethan shrugged, picking up a tray of drinks. "Why bother? He's probably just some random guy who'll disappear into the night." But something nagged at him. Why did that guy seem so familiar? He brushed the thought away and returned to the table after a few minutes. "Have you decided, sir?" Ethan asked, trying to sound pleasant but failing. The man glanced up. "I'll start with a bowl of the clam chowder, and maybe you can recommend something for the main course." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You want my recommendation?" Sure, the burgers are popular. Or you could try the steak, though it's probably not what you're used to." His tone carried a subtle jab, but the man didn't react. "Steak sounds good," the man said. "Medium rare, please." Ethan scribbled down the order and walked back to the kitchen, muttering under his breath, "Stack and chowder, classic." As the man waited for his food, he pulled out his phone, scrolling through something quietly. A few people at nearby tables started sneaking glances at him, whispering to each other. One diner even pulled out their phone to snap a quick photo. "Hey, doesn't he look like?" one woman whispered to her partner. "Nah, can't be the man," replied. "Why would someone like him come here by now?" CLA had caught wind of the murmurs. She leaned toward Ethan as he grabbed the food from the kitchen. "I think that guy's someone famous." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on, famous people don't show up in places like this, not dressed like that." CLA smirked. "I don't know, something about him feels different. You don't recognize him at all." Ethan shook his head and sighed. "Nope, and I don't care. He's table S and that's it." As Ethan approached table S with the steaming bowl of chowder, something about the man's calm demeanor made him pause for half a second. He shook it off and set the bowl down with a bit too much force, some of the soup sloshing over the edge onto the table. "Enjoy," Ethan said quietly before walking. Away the man didn't flinch. Instead, he carefully grabbed a napkin and wiped the spill, smiling faintly to himself as if he found the whole situation oddly amusing at this point. The murmurs in the room had grown louder. More people were starting to notice the man, and the tension was palpable. CLA, now visibly excited, whispered to Ethan, "Come on, you have to see it now. Who do you think he is?" Ethan rolled his eyes again, but couldn't help glancing toward table as the man's face did look familiar, but he still couldn't place it all right. "Fine," Ethan said, crossing his arms. "Let's take a vote. If you think this guy's someone famous, comment 1. If not, comment 2. I'm curious to see what people think." The air in Riverside Beastro seemed to thrum with curiosity. Who was this man quietly sitting at table 7? Why did he seem so at ease even as more and more eyes turned toward him? And why wasn't Ethan stubborn as ever, willing to admit that maybe, just maybe, this was no ordinary customer? Ethan grabbed another tray of drinks from the counter, ignoring the rising buzz around table 7. He was determined not to let the diner's excitement sway him, famous or not. The guy at table 7 had shown up without a reservation, dressed like a tourist, and Ethan wasn't about to treat him any differently. He walked past CLA, who was now visibly suppressing her excitement. "I think you should Google him," she whispered, nudging him with her elbow. Ethan waved her off. "Even if he is someone, so what? He's just another guy ordering steak and chowder. Doesn't mean I need to roll out the red carpet." He delivered drinks to another table and finally returned to table 7 with theme and steak, setting it down with slightly less care than usual. Ethan couldn't resist a jab. "Medium rare steak and chowder, a bold choice. Let me know if you need ketchup." The man looked up, his calm expression unwavering. "Thank you," he said, picking up his fork and knife. "I'll let you know if I do." Ethan huffed quietly and turned to leave, but as he walked back to the kitchen, the man's words followed him, steady, polite, and strangely disarming. There was no frustration, no irritation. It was almost like the guy was enjoying this whole situation in the kitchen. Ethan grumbled as he handed off an order slip to the chef. He's got that whole too calm, too care vibe, like he thinks he's better than everyone here. The chef, a burly man in his 50s, didn't look up from his station. "Maybe he's just polite. That's a thing, Ethan frowned. "Yeah, polite or smug, either way, he's getting on my nerves." Meanwhile, the murmurs in the dining area continued to grow. CLA couldn't help herself anymore. She walked over to Ethan as he stood by the counter, arms crossed, watching the room. "Ethan," she hissed, "you need to look at table S again. People are staring. One of the tourists just took his picture." Ethan glanced at the table. The man was sitting there quietly enjoying his steak like he didn't have a care in the world. A couple at a nearby table were whispering behind their hands, and a young woman had her phone pointed subtly in his direction. "Okay, so maybe he's famous," Ethan admitted, lowering his voice. "Big deal. He's still just a guy sitting in my section," CLA groaned. "You're impossible. Look at him, really look. He looks like a guy who wants steak and chowder." Ethan interrupted, rolling his eyes seriously. "CLA, if he's such a big deal, why isn't he making a fuss? Why doesn't he have an entourage? Why isn't he at some 5-star place instead of his here?" CLA opened her mouth to respond, but Ethan had already walked off, determined to focus on his other tables. As Ethan busied himself clearing plates and refilling drinks, his mind wandered back to table S. The man wasn't just calm. He was composed, almost like he was observing the room rather than being a part of it. It wasn't the way most customers behaved, especially when they were being treated less than warmly. "Maybe he's used to it," Ethan muttered to himself. "Maybe this whole polite and quiet thing is just an act." When he returned to the table to check on the man, Ethan tried to keep his tone neutral. "Everything okay with the steak?" The man looked, his expression thoughtful. "It's perfect, thank you." Ethan hesitated. There was something about the way the man spoke, measured and sincere, that caught him off guard. He cleared his throat. "Can I get you anything else?" The man gave a small smile. "I'd like to try the dessert menu if you don't mind." Ethan nodded curtly. Retreating to the counter, he handed the dessert menu to CLA and muttered, "Give this to him. I can't deal with whatever vibe he's putting out." CLA smirked but didn't argue as she approached Table S with the menu, she greeted the man warmly, her curiosity clearly piqued. Here you go, sir, our desserts are made fresh daily. The chocolate lava cake is a favorite, thank you. The man said, his tone as gentle as ever. He flipped open the menu and studied it for a moment before looking back up. The lava cake sounds great. I'll have that. CLA smiled, excellent choice. I'll put that in for you right away. Ethan leaned against the counter watching as CLA returned to the kitchen to place the order. What's his deal? Asked, lowering his voice. He's just nice. CLA said with a shrug. You should try it sometime. Ethan glared at her, but she just laughed and walked away as the kitchen prepared the dessert. Ethan couldn't help but notice the atmosphere in the dining room. The murmurs had grown into low conversations, and it was clear that many of the diners were aware of something. He wasn't all right. Ethan muttered, pulling out his phone. Let's see what's so special about this guy. He opened the browser and typed in a description. Man, black sweater, jeans, small town bistro, nothing useful. Came up frustrated. He shoved the phone back into his pocket and decided to let it go when the dessert was ready. Ethan hesitated before picking it up. His frustration had ebbed into a strange mix of curiosity and unease. He wasn't sure why, but he felt like he was about to walk into something he couldn't quite understand. He set the dessert on the table with more care this time. Chocolate lava cake, he said simply. Anything else? The man looked up, his expression warm. No, this is perfect, thank you. Ethan nodded and walked away, but as he turned, he heard the man say softly, You've had a long day, haven't you? Ethan froze, his back to the table for a moment. He didn't know how to respond, then he turned slowly, forcing a tight smile, something like that. The man nodded, his eyes calm and understanding. It shows, but you're doing a good job. Ethan didn't know what to say. He muttered a quick thanks and walked back to the counter, his mind racing. There was something about this guy, something different. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important by now. The dining room had quieted down. Most of the tables were empty, and the remaining diners were finishing their meals, but Table S still felt like the center of attention, even though the man hadn't done anything to draw it. Ethan stood by the counter, arms crossed, watching the room for the first time that evening. He felt a flicker of doubt about how he'd handled the night. Who is this guy? He whispered to himself. And just as he was starting to piece things together, the man at table 7 quietly stood up, leaving a neatly folded bill on the table. He caught Ethan's eye as he walked toward the door and gave a small nod. Good night, the man said, his voice soft but resonant. Ethan nodded back, unable to find the words to respond as the door closed behind him. Ethan turned to CLA. All right, he said, his voice low. Tell me what I just missed. CLA's eyes sparkled with amusement. You really don't know, do you? Ethan shook his head. Number. And now I need to know. Ethan paced behind the counter, the mystery of table 7 gnawing at him. CLA stood nearby, cleaning glasses and watching him with a smirk. Are you seriously telling me you don't recognize him? She asked, trying to hold back a laugh. Ethan shot her a glare. No, CLA. I don't, and unless he's some YouTube food reviewer or a travel blogger, I don't see why it matters. CLA shook her head. Not a YouTuber. Ethan, think bigger way. Bigger before Ethan could argue. Linda. The manager walked into the dining area, her brows furrowed. Why does everyone look like they're holding a secret? She asked, scanning the room. It's table S, CLA said, jerking her head toward the now empty table. The guy who was sitting there, pretty sure he's someone famous. Linda raised an eyebrow. What do you mean famous? Ethan crossed his arms. Claire thinks he's a big deal, but he's just some guy who ordered chowder and a steak. CLA sighed dramatically and turned to Linda. You recognize him, right? Linda glanced at the table, then back at Ethan and CLA. Wait, was that? Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't finish her sentence at that moment. A tourist from a nearby table approached the counter, phone in hand. He looked at Ethan, excitement written all over his face. Hey, you know the guy who was sitting at table 7? The tourist asked. Ethan sighed. Yeah, what about him? The tourist held up his phone, showing a grainy photo he had taken. That's Keanu Reeves. Man, you didn't recognize him. Ethan blinked for a second. He thought the guy was joking. What? No way, Keanu Reeves wouldn't come to a place like this. CLA burst out laughing. "I told you," she said, slapping the counter. Linda's eyes widened further. That was Keanu Reeves here in our bistro. The tourist nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. I'm a huge fan as soon as I saw him. I knew it was him. Even Googled it to double check." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. Suddenly, every moment from the night replayed in his mind, the sarcastic remarks, the condescending tone, the soup incident. "Are you serious?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. CLA grinned, clearly enjoying his discomfort. "Oh, he's serious, and so am I. You just spent the last 2 hours treating one of the biggest movie stars in the world like a regular Joe." Ethan leaned heavily against the counter, his head spinning. I didn't know," he mumbled. "How was I supposed to know?" Linda crossed her arms, looking both amused and exasperated. "You could have started by not being so rude to a customer in the first place, famous. Or not, Ethan. That attitude isn't acceptable." CLA Chuck. "Oh, come on, Linda. You've got to admit it's kind of funny. I mean, Ethan here just served Neo from the Matrix and he didn't even know it." Ethan groaned, running a hand through his hair. "Great. So now what, he probably thinks I'm the worst waiter on the planet." The tourist chimed in again, grinning ear to ear. "Actually, he looked pretty chill about it. I mean, he's Keanu Reeves. The guy's known for being super nice." Probably didn't even mind as the word sank in. Ethan felt a strange mix of relief, and guilt. Sure, Keanu hadn't blown up at him or caused a scene, but that somehow made it worse. The calm, kind way he'd handled everything only highlighted how poorly Ethan had behaved. "I have to fix this," Ethan said, suddenly standing up straight. CLA raised an eyebrow. "Fix what? He's gone." "Ethan, what are you gonna do? Chase him down and apologize?" "Maybe," Ethan said, grabbing a napkin and a pen from the counter. He quickly scrolled a note and handed it to the tourist. "Here," Ethan said, his voice firm. "If you see him again, give him this." The tourist looked at the note, then back at Ethan. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Ethan replied. The note read, "Mr. Reeves, I owe you an apology for how I treated you tonight. I didn't realize who you were, but that's no excuse for being rude. You deserved better if you're ever back in town. I'd like the chance to make it right." Ethan, as the tourist left the bistro. Ethan leaned against the counter, exhausted. Claire and Linda exchanged glances, their expressions softening. "Well," CLA said, breaking the silence, "I guess that's one way to handle it." Linda nodded. "It's a good start. But next time, Ethan, maybe don't wait until someone turns out to be famous to treat them with respect." Ethan sighed heavily. Lesson learned, but as he cleaned up the now empty tables, he couldn't shake the feeling that the night wasn't over yet. The following evening, Riverside Beastro was quieter than usual. The rain had stopped, and a cool breeze wafted through the small Oregon town. Ethan stood behind the counter, wiping down glasses with a noticeable lack of energy. The events of the previous night played on a loop in his mind, each sarcastic remark now making him cringe. CLA leaned against the counter next to him, her usual smirk replaced by a softer expression. "You've been quiet all day," she said, still thinking about last night. Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. "I keep replaying it, wondering why I didn't just keep my mouth shut. He was nothing but polite and He shook his head. "I blew it." Linda walked over, holding their observation book. "Well, maybe you'll get a chance to redeem yourself," she said casually. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Linda flipped the book around and tapped the last entry on the page, "reservation for one table night." Ethan's eyes widened. "You're kidding, not even a little," Linda said, raising an eyebrow. "And yes, it's under the name Keanu Reeves by 7:30 p. But Ethan was a bundle of nerves. The bistro wasn't packed, but the atmosphere felt charged. Word had gotten around town, and a few tables of diners whispered excitedly as they glanced at the door at 7:45 p.m. Sharp, the door opened, and in walked Keanu Reeves, dressed much the same as the night before. Black sweater jeans, and an unassuming smile. He looked completely at ease, as though he had no idea the impact his presence had on the room. Linda greeted him at the door. This time, her tone warm and professional. "Welcome back, Mr. Reeves. Your table is ready." Keanu smiled, nodding slightly. "Thank you, and please just call me Keanu." Linda led him to table 7, but this time the seat wasn't tucked away near the kitchen. Instead, It was in a prime spot by the window, offering a view of the quaint town square. As Keanu said, he glanced around, his eyes briefly meeting Ethan's across the room. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He quickly wiped his hands on his apron and approached the table, his heart pounding. "Good evening, sir," Ethan said, his voice steadier than he expected. "Welcome back to Riverside Beastro. I'll be your waiter tonight." Keanu looked up, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Good evening, Ethan." The use of his name caught Ethan off guard. He swallowed hard and continued. "Before we started, I just want to say, I'm sorry about last night. I wasn't professional, and I didn't treat you with the respect you deserve." Keanu tilted his head slightly. Studying Ethan, "Thank you for saying that," he said, his voice calm, "but I'm curious why the change of heart." Ethan hesitated, glancing at the floor, before meeting Keanu's gaze. "Because I realized I judged you without knowing anything about you. And it wasn't just you. I've been letting my frustrations with life affect how I treat people. That's not who I want to be." Keanu nodded, leaning back slightly in his chair. "Fair enough, we all have our moments. What's been frustrating you?" Ethan blinked, caught off guard by the question. It's just a lot. I've been working here for years and it feels like I'm stuck. I wanted to do more. Go to culinary school maybe, but life got in the way. Bills, family stuff, you know?" Keanu's expression softened. "I do know it's not easy to feel like you're stuck, especially when you have dreams pulling you in another direction." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He hadn't expected this conversation, let alone empathy, from someone like Keanu Reeves. "It's just hard to see a way out," he admitted. Keanu nodded thoughtfully. "I get it, but sometimes the way out isn't as far off as it seems. You just have to be open to unexpected opportunities." Ethan glanced around, noticing how the room had grown quieter. Diners were clearly trying to eavesdrop. Without being obvious, he cleared his throat, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "Can I get you something to drink while you look over the menu?" Keanu smiled. "I'll take the house red wine, please, and no rush. I'm in no hurry." Tonight, Ethan nodded and headed to the counter where CLA was waiting, arms crossed. "Well," she whispered, "how's it going?" "He's not what I expected," Ethan admitted, grabbing a bottle of wine. "He's nice, like genuinely nice. And he asked about me like he actually cares." CLA smiled knowingly. "Yeah, he's Keanu Reeves. That's kind of his thing." As the night went on, Ethan found himself relaxing. He served Keanu's wine and later took his order. Steak again, this time with a side of roasted vegetables. The conversation was light but sincere, with Keanu occasionally asking about the bistro, the town, and even Ethan's favorite dishes to make. By the time dessert rolled around, Ethan felt like he was talking to an old friend rather than a Hollywood star. Keanu ordered the chocolate lava cake again, and when Ethan brought it to the table, he couldn't resist a small smile. "I promise not to spill anything on you this time," Ethan joked. Keanu chuckled, the sound warm and genuine, much appreciated. As Keanu finished his dessert, he leaned back in his chair and looked at Ethan. "So, what's your next step?" he asked. Ethan frowned. "My next step?" Keanu nodded. "In life, if you're feeling stuck, what's the first thing you'd change?" Ethan hesitated, considering the question. "I guess I'd try to go back to school, culinary school, but it's expensive and I can't just leave my family hanging." Keanu's expression was thoughtful. "That's fair. But have you looked into scholarships, grants? Sometimes the hardest part is just taking the first step." Ethan shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe. I'll think about it when the check came." Keanu didn't just leave a tip. He left a note folded neatly under the receipt. After he left, Ethan returned to the table to clear it and found the note. It read, "Ethan, you've got potential. Don't let life's challenges stop you from chasing what you want. Remember, unexpected opportunities can change everything." Ethan stared, the note, his chest tightening with emotion. For the first time in years, he felt like someone believed in him. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as stuck as he thought. As he tucked the note into his pocket, Claire approached, grinning. "What's it say?" Ethan shook, his head smiling faintly. "Nothing, just a reminder that maybe it's time to take a chance." It had been 3 days since Keanu's second visit to Riverside Beastro. Ethan carried on with his usual routine, but something felt different. Then Keanu left sat, folded in his wallet, and every time he touched it he felt a surge of both hope and anxiety. Could he take a chance on himself? Could he leave behind the life he'd known for so long that evening? As Ethan wiped down the counter during a lull in the dinner rush, Linda approached him with an envelope in hand. "This came for you earlier," she said, placing it on the counter. Ethan frowned, wiping his hands on his apron before. Picking it up, the envelope was plain. His name written in bold, neat handwriting, no return address who sent it. He asked Linda, shrugged. Some courier said it was urgent. Curiosity piqued. Ethan opened the envelope. Inside was a short letter and a plain ticket. His eyes scanned the letter, his pulse quickening with every word. "Ethan, you probably weren't expecting this, but I wanted to extend an invitation. I've been thinking about our conversation, and I believe in giving people a shot when they're ready to take it if you're interested. Meet me in Los Angeles. You'll find all the details in the itinerary. Attached, no pressure, just an opportunity." Ethan stared at the letter, his heart pounding. A plain ticketo. Los Angeles, an invitation from Keanu Reeves himself. "What is it, CLA?" asked Ing over his shoulder. Ethan hesitated, unsure how to explain. "It's from him, Keanu." CLA's jaw dropped. "Are you serious? What does it say?" Ethan handed her the letter, watching as her eyes widened. "Ethan, this is huge. Are you going to go?" He hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. "I don't know. I mean, what if I mess it up? What if it's a mistake?" Linda stepped forward, her tone firm, but kind. "Ethan, opportunities like this don't come every day. If he sees something in you, maybe it's time you see it too." Ethan swallowed hard, his gaze drifting to the letter. "I don't even know what he wants me to do. Does it matter?" "CLA," said her voice excited. "It's Keanu Reeves. Whatever it is, it'll be worth." 2 days later. Ethan stood in the bustling terminal of LAX, clutching the small duffel bag that held everything. He thought he might need. His stomach churned with nerves, but the memory of Keanu's calm smile and encouraging words kept him moving forward. A black car waited for him outside the airport, the driver holding a sign with his name. Ethan climbed in, unsure of what to expect. The car wound through the city streets, finally stopping in front of a sleek building in Beverly Hills. Ethan stepped out, his breath catching as he took in the sight of the modern glass-walled structure. "This way," the driver said. Leading him inside, Ethan followed his footsteps, echoing in the quiet lobby. The driver escorted him to a private elevator and pressed a button. Moments later, the doors opened to reveal a spacious penthouse suite with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a stunning view of the Los Angeles skyline. And there, standing by the window, was Keanu Reeves. "Ethan," Keanu said, turning to greet him. With a warm smile, "I'm glad you came." Ethan nodded, his voice caught in his throat. "Thanks for inviting me. I wasn't sure what to expect." Keanu gestured toward a pair of chairs near a small table where 2 cups of coffee sat steaming. "Have a seat. Let's talk." Ethan sat, his nerves easing slightly as Keanu's calm demeanor settled the room. "I've been thinking about our conversation at the bistro." Keanu began, leaning back in his chair. "You talked about feeling stuck, about wanting more, and I thought, why not help you find that more?" Ethan blinked, unsure what to say. "But why me? I'm just a waiter from a small town. You could work with anyone. People who are already successful." Keanu shook his head, a small smile on his lips. "Success isn't about where you start, it's about where you're willing to go. I've worked with plenty of talented people, but what stands out is authenticity. And you, Ethan, are real. You don't sugarcoat things, and you're not afraid to speak your mind. That's rare." Ethan, chest tightened. "But I don't have any real skills. I've never even left Oregon before." Keanu leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "What if I told you that's exactly why I want to work with you? You have a fresh perspective, one that's grounded in reality. I need someone like that, someone who's not afraid to tell me the truth even when it's uncomfortable." Ethan frowned, his mind racing. "So, what exactly would I be doing?" Keanu chuckled softly. "To start, helping me with some personal projects. I'm developing a documentary about life's everyday heroes, people like you who work hard, face challenges, and still manage to keep moving forward. I want your perspective, your input. You'd be part of the creative team." Ethan stared at him, stunned. "You're serious. Dead serious." Keanu said, "And don't worry, I'll make sure you're supported. This isn't just about helping me, it's about giving you the chance to grow for a moment." Ethan sat in silence, the weight of the offer sinking in. This wasn't a chance to change everything, but doubt still lingered. "What if I mess it up?" Ethan asked quietly. Keanu smiled. "You will, we all do, but that's part of the process. The question is, are you willing to try?" Ethan thought about the long nights at the bistro, the feeling of being stuck, the dreams he'd pushed aside for years. He thought about his family, his co-workers, and the note Keanu had left him. Finally, he took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay, I'm in." Keanu extended a hand, his smile widening. "Welcome to the team, Ethan," as they shook hands. Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. For the first time. The path ahead didn't seem so daunting. It felt possible 2 months later. Ethan stood on the rooftop terrace of a production studio in Los Angeles, the city skyline glowing under the golden sunset. His life had changed in ways he never thought possible. He was no longer the frustrated small-town waiter at Riverside Beastro. He was now part of a creative team, led by Keanu Reeves himself. Ethan had spent weeks traveling with Keanu, meeting everyday people with extraordinary stories, teachers, firefighters, small business owners, and single parents who had overcome insurmountable odds. Together, they were crafting a documentary that celebrated resilience and the human spirit. It was a project Ethan couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams. Ash leaned against the railing. Keanu walked up beside him, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You've settled in nicely," Keanu said, with a smile, handing Ethan a cup. Ethan chuckled. "Still feels surreal. I keep waiting for someone to tell me it's all a prank." Keanu shook his head. "No prank. You earned your spot here, Ethan. You just needed someone to remind you what you were capable of." Ethan looked down at his coffee, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "It's crazy how one moment can change everything. If you hadn't come into the bistro that night." Keanu laughed softly. "If I hadn't come to the bistro, you'd still be serving chowder and steaks, but you'd also still be someone with the potential to do more. The difference is now you see it too." Ethan smiled, feeling the truth. Those words, he had grown more in the past 2 months than he had in years. He'd faced his fears, stepped out of his comfort zone, and learned to trust himself. And in the process, he had discovered something unexpected. His voice mattered. "Thanks for taking a chance on me." Ethan said, his voice sincere. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to repay you." Keanu shook his head. "No need to repay me. Just keep being honest, keep working hard, and keep paying it forward when you can." Later that evening, Ethan found himself scrolling through comments on the channel, where their documentary's trailer had just been posted. The response was overwhelming. People from all over the world shared their excitement, gratitude, and personal stories in the comment section. One comment stood out. "I'm a waiter, just like Ethan. This gives me hope that I can change my life too." Ethan felt a lump in his throat as he read the words. He glanced at the camera sitting on the desk beside him and made a decision, setting it up. He hit record and began to speak. "Hi everyone," Ethan sighed, his voice steady but full of motion. "A few months ago, I was just like a lot of you, feeling stuck, unsure of what my future would hold. Then one unexpected encounter turned everything around. But here's the thing, the opportunity came because I learned to be honest about who I was and what I wanted." He paused, leaning closer to the camera. "So if you've ever felt like you're stuck, like you're not good enough, or like your dreams are too far out of reach, don't give up. Take the chance, even if it feels scary. You never know what's waiting on the other side." Ethan smiled, his confidence shining through. If you believe that it's never too late to start over, comment yes below. And if this story inspired you even a little, hit that subscribe button. Let's keep sharing stories that remind us all of what's possible. As the camera stopped recording, Ethan sat back, feeling a wave of pride and gratitude. He wasn't just telling a story. He was living proof that change was possible. No matter where you started, somewhere out there he knew someone would watch the video, leave a comment, and maybe, just maybe, take their own leap of faith. And so as the credits rolled on this chapter of Ethan's life, one thing was certain: the story wasn't over. It was just beginning.